In 1672, a single document signed in London would condemn 3 million human souls to chains, not through military conquest or territorial expansion, but through something far more sinister. A shipping route so profitable it generated the modern equivalent of £12 billion from human cargo. This trick would transform Britain from a secondary European power into a global empire. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a simple 3-step shipping route became history's most profitable and most horrific business model. You'll discover why enslaved Africans were packed with Chinese silk and Indian cotton. You'll learn how a lottery system made millionaires despite 20% of the cargo dying. And you'll see the royal monopoly that turned human trafficking into state policy. How did Britain overtake Spain and Portugal in the slave trade? What was the secret triangular pattern that maximized profits? Why did King Charles II personally invest in human trafficking? But here's what the history books don't tell you. How could ships profit when 1 in 5 captives died? How did a single company control an entire continent's trade? One slave ship captain called it a lottery, while making a fortune that would shock modern billionaires. To understand this horror, we must first understand the world that created it. Picture London in 1660, a nation exhausted by civil war, a restored monarchy, desperate for revenue, and across the Atlantic, sugar plantations crying out for labor. What happened next defied all maritime law. In the counting houses of London, merchants discovered a mathematical formula. Buy humans for £3 in Africa, sell them for £30 in Barbados. Load sugar worth £100 per ton for the return voyage. The triangular trade wasn't just profitable, it was alchemy turning flesh into gold. The man behind it all had blood on his crown. If you're fascinated by the dark truths of history that shaped our modern world, hit that like button and subscribe for more untold stories of empire, trade, and human tragedy. Now, let me take you back to the docks of 17th century London, where this nightmare began. The year is 1660. King Charles II has just reclaimed his father's throne after years of exile. England is broke. The Civil War has drained the treasury. The Dutch are dominating global trade. Spain still controls vast colonial wealth. But Charles has a plan that will change everything. They called him the Merry Monarch, but there was nothing merry about his economic vision. The next detail will turn your stomach. Charles understood that sugar was the new gold. Caribbean plantations were producing fortunes. But they needed one thing above all: endless supplies of enslaved labor. The Portuguese had been trafficking humans from Africa for 200 years. The Spanish had their asiento system, but the English were about to perfect the business. The mathematics of misery worked like this. Every sugar plantation needed 200 enslaved workers. Every year, 25% died from overwork. That meant constant replacement, constant profit. Enter the Duke of York, the future King James II. He wasn't just the king's brother. He was about to become the largest shareholder in human misery. What happened next would transform the Atlantic. The Navigation Acts had already decreed that English colonies could only trade with English ships. Now came the masterstroke. In 1672, Charles granted a royal charter to the Royal African Company, exclusive rights to all English trade with Africa, monopoly power over an entire continent. Here's where British innovation turned deadly. This wasn't just permission to trade, it was state-sponsored trafficking with the Crown as chief investor. Bristol merchants rubbed their hands. Liverpool shipbuilders expanded their yards. London bankers opened new credit lines. Unknown to the captives below deck, a network was forming that would reshape 3 continents. But the Royal African Company had solved this problem. They didn't just send ships, they built fortresses. Cape Coast Castle became their headquarters. Massive stone walls, underground dungeons that could hold 1,000 humans. The truth was worse than anyone imagined. These weren't trading posts. They were processing centers for human cargo. The Dutch still controlled much of the Gold Coast. The Portuguese held Angola. But the English had patience and deeper pockets. This is where greed became genocide. They offered African kings guns and gunpowder, not for hunting, for capturing rival tribes to sell. The Ashanti Kingdom grew powerful on English weapons. The Kingdom of Dahomey built its economy on slave raids. Then came the innovation that multiplied suffering. The English introduced credit systems. African rulers could get weapons now, pay in captives later. By 1672, everything was in place. Ships, forts, African allies, royal backing, financial networks. All that remained was to set the triangle in motion. The first ships were already being fitted. In the shipyards of Bristol and Liverpool, a new type of vessel was taking shape. These weren't ordinary merchant ships. But wait, it gets worse. They were specially designed for human cargo. 300 tons, 110 feet long, 2 decks with just 5 feet of clearance, built to carry 450 souls in a space meant for 200. The captains recruited for these voyages weren't ordinary sailors. The ledgers tell a story of systematic horror. Men like John Newton, who would later write Amazing Grace after years of trafficking humans. Hard men who could calculate profit margins while children died in their holds. Here's the statistic that shocked Parliament. A good captain could turn £4,000 in ship and trade goods into £12,000 in sugar and profits, even with 20% of the human cargo dying. The mathematics were irresistible. The Royal African Company established a precise system. What follows reads like economic horror fiction. First, outfit the ship in London. Indian cotton textiles, Chinese silk, Venetian beads, brass pans from Birmingham, and most importantly, guns. Thousands of guns. The crew had to be carefully selected. This single decision would haunt generations. 40 men to control 450 captives. The surgeon who would decide who lived or died. The cooper to maintain water barrels. The gunner to suppress revolts. Each man promised a share of the profits. But the real money wasn't in the slaves. It was in the complete triangle. Manufactured goods to Africa, humans to the Americas, sugar and rum back to England, every leg profitable, every death calculated into the margins. Along the African coast, a network of factors and agents prepared. Here's where humanity hit rock bottom. European agents lived in the coastal forts, negotiating prices like cattle dealers, £3 for a healthy male, £2 for a woman, 10 shillings for a child, paid in goods, never gold. The African kingdoms had their own systems. Then, someone discovered the loophole. Wars specifically launched to capture prisoners for sale. Judicial systems corrupted to sentence minor criminals to slavery. Debt bondage expanded to include entire families. This detail changes everything you thought you knew. The slave coast earned its name not from Europeans, but from African kingdoms that specialized in the trade. The Kingdom of Ouida processed 20,000 humans annually through its ports. In London, investors gathered at Lloyd's Coffee House. What came next revolutionized evil. They created insurance policies on human cargo. Ships could jettison sick captives overboard and claim insurance payments. Murder became a financial instrument. The ships departing London carried more than trade goods. The true cost emerges in the ledgers. Letters of credit, diplomatic instructions, standardized shackles sized for men, women, and children, branding irons with company marks, and detailed instructions on packing humans for maximum profit. By summer 1672, the first Royal African Company ship raised anchor. This moment would echo for centuries. The Duke of York watched from the Thames as his investment set sail. Below deck, the empty holds waited. In Africa, the barracoons were filling. The captain's orders were specific. Sail to the Gold Coast. Trade for 450 healthy adults. No elderly. Preference for those aged 15 to 25. Maximum 30% women. The profit margins will stagger you. Each captive bought for £3 would sell for £25 minimum in Barbados. After expenses, 500% profit. As the ship cleared the channel, the crew made preparations. The captains had a saying that chills the blood. Loose packing brings disease. Tight packing brings death. Find the profitable middle. They had 47 days to solve that equation. On the African coast, word spread that English ships were coming with the best goods. Local traders began their own grim harvest. Villages 50 miles inland would soon feel the impact. As anchors lifted, 450 souls descended into hell. Dawn, September 1672. The English ship rounds Cape Palmas after 31 days at sea. The African coast emerges from morning mist. But here's what the history books don't tell you. The captain has been calculating. Every day at sea costs money. Every day in port risks disease. He needs to fill his hold in under 3 weeks. The navigation to Cape Coast Castle requires precision. This led directly to shallow waters filled with sandbanks. Portuguese wrecks warning of the dangers. But the real hazard waits on shore. European competitors. Dutch ships anchored at Elmina. French traders at Assini. Each nation guarding its human supply chain. The manifest reveals the true nature of this voyage. Picture the scene in your mind. 2,000 guns, 30,000 yards of cotton, 500 brass kettles, 10 tons of iron bars, 300 gallons of brandy, and hidden in the captain's cabin, gifts for African kings, silk umbrellas, gilt-framed mirrors, mechanical clocks. What happened next would transform the Atlantic. The ship anchors 2 miles offshore, too valuable to risk closer. Canoes approach, paddled by Fante middlemen. The first negotiations begin before the captain sets foot on land. Information costs brandy. Prices cost promises. Cape Coast Castle looms white against green forests. You might think this couldn't get worse. 3-foot-thick walls, cannon facing seaward and landward. The English flag flies above dungeons that can hold 1,500 humans. The stench reaches the ship. The captain goes ashore with his purser and surgeon. Here's the statistic that shocked Parliament. The factor who greets them has survived 2 years on the coast. Average life expectancy for Europeans, 18 months. Malaria, yellow fever. But profits make men gamble with death. Inside the castle, business begins. The next detail will turn your stomach. The factor shows his current stock. 200 captives in the male dungeon. 50 women separately confined. They've been waiting 3 weeks, fed once daily, exercised in chains on the parade ground. But first comes the selection process. This is where British innovation turned deadly. The surgeon examines each captive like livestock. Teeth checked for age. Muscles prodded for strength. Branded with hot iron to prevent substitution. The rejected face, uncertain fate. The captain haggles over every soul. What follows reads like economic horror fiction. Strong males, £3 in trade goods. Women, £2 10 shillings. Children, 15 shillings. But the factor inflates values. Those guns worth £1 in London? Here they're worth £3. Creative accounting enables enormous profits. You won't believe what comes next. Word spreads inland that an English ship needs 450 captives. African traders increase their raids. Judicial proceedings accelerate. Debtors find themselves sentenced to lifetime bondage. Wars spontaneously erupt between villages. The loading process takes 2 weeks. This single decision would haunt generations. Men loaded first, shackled in pairs, right leg to left leg. Women next, sometimes unshackled to save iron. Children last, packed between adults. The ship's carpenter builds additional platforms to maximize capacity. Each dawn brings new horrors. Then came the moment that defined an empire. Local traders arrive with coffles, human chains stretching back into the forest. 50, sometimes 100 captives linked neck to neck. Many have walked 200 miles from the interior. The weak, already dead along the route. The barracoons overflow. You're about to learn the real price. The castle operates a credit system. Captives delivered today, payment in goods later. African merchants become creditors to European slavers. Debt bondage, financing human bondage. Inside the ship, transformation occurs. Remember this number. The hold, originally 5 feet high, now has platforms every 2.5 feet. Air holes cut in the sides, covered with iron grates. The space designed for 300 now configured for 450, 18 inches width per human, less than a coffin. The crew grows nervous as the hold fills. Ask yourself how humans justified this. They've seen slave revolts. 1 in 10 voyagers experiences an uprising. The gunner checks his ammunition. 6 cannon loaded with grape shot face the main hatch. Muskets distributed to trusted crew. On the final day, chaos. The mathematics of dehumanization. Last-minute substitutions as healthier captives arrive. Families separated when numbers don't match. A mother's scream as her child is led to a different ship. The captain notes only, cargo complete, 453 souls, 3 extra for insurance against mortality. As night falls, final preparations. But wait, it gets worse. Leg irons tested. Food supplies calculated. 1 pint of water daily per captive. 1 pound of yams. Ship's doctor estimates 15% loss acceptable, 20% still profitable, 25% breaks even. Above that, financial disaster. The factor's final gift. Intelligence on winds and currents. What came next revolutionized evil. The middle passage has been mapped for maximum efficiency. 47 days average to Barbados. Each day precisely calculated. The captain knows exactly how many will die. At dawn, anchors rise. The castle's cannon fire a farewell salute. Below deck, 453 humans begin to understand their fate. As the ship's hold filled with human cargo, the real nightmare was about to begin. Hour 1. The ship clears Cape Coast Castle's cannon range. Below deck, panic spreads through darkness. You might think this couldn't get worse. 453 humans packed in 18-inch spaces realize the ship is moving. Chains rattle against wood. Children scream for parents 3 feet away but unreachable. The temperature is already 95 degrees. The captain orders the first airing. This is where greed became genocide. 50 men brought up in chains, forced to dance, jump in their shackles while sailors play fiddles. Those who refuse are flogged. The exercise isn't mercy. It's economics. Muscles must be maintained for market value. Day 3 brings the first death. But the Royal African Company had solved this problem. A man refuses all food. Force feeding through a metal device breaks his teeth. He dies by morning. The captain writes, 1 loss, 452 remaining, within acceptable parameters. The body goes overboard. Sharks already follow the ship. By day 5, seasickness transforms the hold into hell. What happened next defied all maritime law. No sanitation except crude buckets, impossible to reach in chains. Human waste covers the platforms. The surgeon refuses to go below, claims the stench would kill a European in minutes. Captives lie in their own filth for days. Here's what the history books don't tell you. The women's section becomes a target for crew assault. Though regulations forbid it, who enforces law in the middle of the Atlantic? The captain turns blind eyes. Morale must be maintained. Some women throw themselves overboard at first opportunity. Day 8. The first disease appears. This led directly to flux, dysentery spreading through contaminated water. 1 case becomes 10, 10 becomes 50. The surgeon makes a calculation. Isolate the sick. Impossible in the packed hold. Medicine is expensive. Let disease run its course. But here's where the horror multiplies. The mathematics of misery worked like this. Food distribution requires bringing groups on deck. Each group sees the ocean, sees freedom in the waves. Mass suicide attempts begin. Nets are rigged around the ship. Death is no longer an escape option. Day 12 brings the first organized resistance. Unknown to the captives below deck, Mandinka warriors have filed through their shackles using fingernails. They wait for the morning airing. But informants exist even here. A captive seeking favor reveals the plot. 20 men are flogged to death as an example. The captain faces a dilemma. Then came the innovation that multiplied suffering. Too much punishment kills valuable cargo. Too little invites revolt. He institutes a reign of calculated terror. Random executions. 1 person thrown overboard alive each day, the others forced to watch. Resistance crumbles into despair. By day 15, the hold resembles a battlefield. Picture the scene in your mind. Bodies of the dead mixed with the living. No space to move them. The living chained to corpses for hours until crew notices. Children who've lost parents curl between strangers' legs. Pregnant women give birth in chains. But wait, it gets worse. The ship hits the doldrums. Wind dies. Progress stops. Water rations cut in half. The captain calculates 37 more days of supplies. Speed is now survival. He orders more canvas. Risks torn sails. Below, tongues swell from thirst. The death rate doubles. Day 20 brings catastrophe. What follows reads like economic horror fiction. Ophthalmia strikes. A blinding eye disease spreading through the packed humans. The surgeon's recommendation shocks even hardened sailors. Throw the infected overboard. Save the sighted for sale. The captain hesitates. These are profits, swimming away. Here's the statistic that shocked Parliament. Insurance policies have a clause. Sick captives thrown overboard, no payment. But if they accidentally drown during a storm, full compensation. The captain watches the barometer, waits for weather, plans murder within legal loopholes. Day 23. The storm arrives. This moment would echo for centuries. Under cover of weather, 42 blind captives are brought on deck, washed overboard according to the log. Insurance will pay £1,260, more than keeping them alive to sell blind in Barbados. The mathematics favour murder. The storm brings new misery. You won't believe what comes next. Ships rolls 40 degrees, captives slide in their waist, chains tearing skin. Vomit adds to the toxic mix. Air holes must be covered. Temperature below reaches 110 degrees. 53 die in 2 days. Bodies pile up faster than crew can remove them. Ask yourself how humans justified this. The captain writes home, cargo suffering expected losses, anticipate 75 to 80% delivery rate, still profitable. He calculates commission on survivors, plans to buy a country estate, never mentions the screams that pierce through 3 decks nightly. Day 30. Provisions run low. The next detail will turn your stomach. Women and children's rations cut further. The strong must survive for profit. A mother watches her infant starve, tries to give her own meager food. Both die within days. The surgeon notes only 2 losses, expected under circumstances. False hope arrives day 32. This detail changes everything you thought you knew. Land, cries the lookout. Captives who understand English spread word. Salvation? But it's a Portuguese slave ship. Becalmed. 5 days out of water. Their cargo already dead. 300 corpses thrown overboard in one mass burial at sea. The crew grows brutal from fear. Then someone discovered the loophole. Captives outnumber sailors, 11 to 1. Only iron and terror maintain control. Floggings increase. A man suspected of organizing resistance has molten lead poured down his throat. Others forced to watch and sing, break their spirits completely. Day 38 brings the worst atrocity. What came next revolutionized evil. Water barrels run dangerously low. The captain does the unthinkable calculation. Reduce cargo to stretch supplies. 54 of the weakest are selected. Thrown overboard at night. No insurance claim this time. Just murder for resource management. You're about to learn the real price. Among those murdered, entire families too weak to separate. The elderly, who've survived African wars, only to die in British commerce. Children orphaned during the voyage, now economic liability. Pregnant women, whose conditions makes them unsaleable. All sacrificed for profit margins. Day 41. Genuine land sighted. Here's where humanity hit rock bottom, Barbados on the horizon. But 30% of the cargo is dead, another 20% dying. The captain orders a final deception. Dying captives are given extra water, palm oil rubbed on skin to appear healthy, the sick drugged to stand upright. Preparation for market. The crew breathes relief. Remember this number. They've survived. Their percentage of profit secured. Below, captives don't understand. Approaching land means separation forever. Families will be split. Communities destroyed. Identities erased. They think the nightmare is ending. It's only transforming. As the ship enters Bridgetown Harbor, the captain makes final preparations. But the Crown had one more trick. Fresh food distributed to improve appearance. Mouths rinsed with vinegar to freshen breath. Chains polished to prevent rust stains on skin. Every detail calculated to maximize sale price. The captain's final log entry. Arrived Barbados with 312 souls of 453 loaded. Mortality 31%. Within projected losses. Anticipate good prices. Request company send supplies for return loading. No mention of the 141 humans who died for his profit. The true cost emerges in the ledgers. Below deck, survivors prepare for the unknown. Some pray to gods across an ocean. Others have stopped believing any god would allow this. Children orphaned during the voyage cling to strangers. The chains that bind them physically have broken their spirits completely. After 47 days of hell, salvation appeared on the horizon, but not for the cargo. Land meant salvation for some, doom for others. Bridgetown Harbor, Barbados. The ship drops anchor among 40 others. The mathematics of dehumanization reaches its climax. 2,000 enslaved Africans will be sold this week alone. The docks teem with plantation owners, overseers, doctors, each calculating flesh into sugar production. The captain negotiates with the harbor master. But here's what the history books don't tell you. Healthy males are bringing 25 pounds. Prime field hands 30 pounds. But his cargo shows 47 days of horror. Ribs visible, brands infected, many can barely stand. Quick thinking required to salvage profits. 3 days of refreshment begin. This is where British innovation turned deadly. Fresh fruit forced into weakened stomachs. Rum mixed with medicine to animate the dying. Hair shaved to hide disease patches. Palm oil continuously applied. The transformation is cosmetic, temporary, long enough to deceive buyers. The doctor's inspection brings fresh terror. You might think this couldn't get worse. Intimate examinations in public, mouths pried open, muscles prodded, women checked for pregnancy, children measured for growth potential. The rejected face an uncertain fate, often death from neglect. Then comes the scramble. What happened next would transform the Atlantic. At a gun signal, buyers rush the holding pen, grabbing humans like merchandise at a sale, ropes thrown around groups, families split in seconds. A mother reaches for her son as different buyers claim them. They will never meet again. The auctioneer's voice rings out. Here's the statistic that shocked Parliament. Lot 47, male, approximately 20 years, strong back, minimal scarring. Opening bid £20. The man stands naked, turning on command. Buyers check teeth like horses, examine whip scars for signs of rebellion, bid on human flesh like cattle. Those not sold in the scramble face the auction block. This single decision would haunt generations. One by one, families begging not to be separated, children clinging to mothers. The auctioneer's assistant uses a whip to maintain order. Sentiment reduces sale price. Economics demands cruelty. Prices vary wildly. The profit margins will stagger you. A skilled tradesman from Senegambia, £35. A young woman deemed breeding stock, £28. Children under 10, £12. The elderly or infirm, sometimes £5, often left to die. The captain calculates rapidly. His 31% mortality still leaves massive profit. The sold are branded again. This moment would echo for centuries. Each plantation has its mark, heated iron pressed into flesh already scarred, new identity burned into skin. African names replaced with European ones. John, Mary, Caesar. Previous lives erased in colonial ledgers. The march to plantations begins immediately. But wait, it gets worse. Chains remain for the journey. 20 miles under Caribbean sun, no rest. Overseers on horseback use whips liberally. The weak collapse, left to die roadside. Others forced to step over them. First lesson in plantation discipline. At the plantation gates, final separation. You won't believe what comes next. Men to one barracks, women to another. Children over 10 to the fields, under 10 to the house. Families divided by function. Mother may see child once weekly. If both survive, many don't survive the first month. The seasoning process begins. Then came the innovation that multiplied suffering. 3 years of breaking spirits completely. 14-hour days in sugar fields. Minimal food. Constant surveillance. Punishment for speaking African languages. For practicing African religions. For showing any sign of former identity. Death or submission, the only options. Meanwhile, at the harbour, the captain completes his transactions. What follows reads like economic horror fiction. 312 humans sold for average £24 each. Gross revenue, £7,488, minus costs. Ship rental, £800. Crew, wages, £600. Trade goods, £1,200. Provisions, £400. Net profit, £4,488. 1,122% return on investment. But the triangle isn't complete. The true cost emerges in the ledgers. Ships don't return empty. Sugar hogsheads worth £100 per ton load into holds that carried humans. Molasses for New England rum distilleries. Cotton for British mills. The same ships, the same routes, different cargo, endless profit. The captain writes to investors. This detail changes everything you thought you knew. Voyage successful despite higher than anticipated mortality. Recommend faster ships to reduce losses. Larger holds to increase capacity. Request backing for 3 more voyages this year. No mention of the 141 dead, just numbers on a ledger. In Bristol, the letter brings celebration. Here's where humanity hit rock bottom. Church bells ring for successful ventures. Investors gather at coffee houses, plan new expeditions, commission larger ships. The captain is heroic, a wealth creator. His portrait will hang in merchant halls. Back in Barbados, the surviving 312 face their fate. Remember this number. Within 1 year, 23% will be dead. Worked to death in cane fields. Suicide. Disease. Punishment. Within 3 years, 40% gone. Average life expectancy. 7 years. Then replacement. The cycle continues. Profit eternal. The ship prepares for departure, but the Crown had one more trick. Laws ensure colonial sugar goes only to Britain. British refineries monopolise processing. British merchants control distribution. Every spoonful of sugar in European tea represents this suffering, an empire built on blood and sweetness. As sails fill for the return voyage, the captain makes a final log entry. Barbados departure, 850 tons sugar loaded, 50 tons molasses. Anticipated London arrival in 38 days. Crew healthy. Request company prepare next Africa cargo. The triangle complete. Ready to begin again. But the profits were just beginning to compound. The ship reaches London 38 days later. Sugar sells for £42,500. After all expenses, total voyage profit, £38,000. In modern money, £4.7 million from one trip. The mathematics of misery worked like this. 141 human deaths generated 1,000% returns. Bristol's transformation into slavery capital was underway. Scale this across decades. What happened next defied all maritime law. By 1750, Britain transported 2.8 million Africans. By abolition in 1807, 3.1 million. The largest forced migration in human history. Each life a ledger entry. Each death a calculated loss. Industrial scale human trafficking. The economic transformation was absolute. This led directly to Liverpool grew from a fishing village to Britain's second city. Bristol's merchants built mansions from blood money. London's banks, Barclays, Lloyds, founded on slave trade profits. The Industrial Revolution financed by Caribbean sugar wealth. But here's what the history books don't tell you. Every British institution carries this stain. The Bank of England's founding capital included slave profits. Oxford and Cambridge received endowments from plantation owners. The Church of England owned sugar estates. Complicity ran deeper than individual evil. Modern parallels haunt us. The next detail will turn your stomach. Today's global supply chains echo triangular trade efficiency. Cobalt mines in Congo. Sweatshops in Bangladesh. Prison labor in America. Different era, similar mathematics. Human suffering calculated into profit margins. History rhymes in corporate boardrooms. The legacy persists in racial wealth gaps. Here's the statistic that shocked Parliament. Average British wealth includes £200,000 in inherited assets, much traceable to colonial exploitation. Meanwhile, Caribbean nations still pay colonial-era debts. Haiti finished paying France for its freedom in 1947. Justice deferred infinitely. Consider modern Liverpool's grand architecture. You're about to learn the real price. The Albert Dock, St. George's Hall, built with slave money. Street names honor slave traders. Penny Lane's namesake, James Penny, who trafficked 7,000 humans. History hidden in plain sight. Tourism erases atrocity. The triangular trade created modern racism. This detail changes everything you thought you knew. Justifying industrial murder required dehumanization, scientific racism, religious excuses, legal frameworks declaring Africans property, ideas that persist, systems that endure. The Middle Passage's psychological cargo. Britain paid £20 million, compensating slave owners in 1833. Remember this number: nothing to the enslaved. That debt wasn't fully paid until 2015. British taxpayers literally just finished paying for slavery. Not to descendants of the enslaved, to descendants of enslavers. Justice inverted. Banks laundering drug money. Fast fashion's exploitation. Tech companies using conflict minerals. What came next revolutionized evil. The triangular trade's innovation wasn't sailing routes. It was normalizing atrocity through bureaucracy, making mass murder mundane through mathematics. Modern corporations learned well. That document signed in 1672 didn't just create a trade route, it created the modern world economy. Sugar wealth funded British industry. Industrial wealth conquered continents. Colonial wealth built today's global inequality. The triangle still turns. Different cargo. Same calculations. The 3 million souls transported by Britain represent more than statistics. Each had a name erased, a family destroyed, a culture severed. Their descendants built the Americas under whips, created wealth they couldn't share, sang sorrow songs that became jazz, blues, revolution. History demands reckoning, not just remembering, understanding how ordinary people committed extraordinary evil, how profits justified any cruelty, how systems persist through centuries. The triangular trade ended. Its logic endures. In boardrooms, in supply chains, in indifference. The clock cannot be turned back. But truth can be told. Legacies can be acknowledged. Reparations can be discussed. Justice, though delayed, can be pursued. The 3 million deserve more than historical footnotes. They deserve recognition that their suffering built the modern world, and that their descendants will no longer be cargo,